And the song was so appropriate because it is time to start talking about our next century. This year, in July, will be 100 years old. 100 years of being Unity in San Francisco. And I don't know if you know how monumental that is, but there are not many Unity churches that are older than us. There's a couple, but not many. Even the flagship Unity Temple on the Plaza in Kansas City was recreated from the original Unity, which was downtown Kansas City. So it's only been there since the 40s, and we've been here since 1919. Not in this space, but here in San Francisco since 1919. So it's quite an amazing feat, and it sort of feels to me like it's time for us to decide really what we want to be, right? All right, so we've been 100 years, and some of it has been just going along. Some of it has been reacting to what's happening in the world. And so I looked back at what's been going on in San Francisco and in the world over this last century as our preparation for our next century. So this was the original Unity logo, and we were called Unity Temple San Francisco in 1919. There's a Bible in the corner over there that is our original Bible. If you flip over in the cover, it says Unity Temple on it. And where is he? Ray. Ray's over here. Ray had it restored for us about 2 years ago. It's an extraordinary piece that we have from our archives. And we have morphed. It's no longer called Unity Temple. It was called Unity Church of San Francisco for a while, and now we are Unity San Francisco with our new logo and our new understandings and our new way of interacting with divinity. And Charles Fillmore, one of our co-founders, famously said, "I reserve the right to change my mind." Right? It's like what we know as spiritual truth right now may shift by tomorrow. It may shift with new scientific or spiritual awakening. And the whole point is that we're here to evolve to what we're really, who we really are. Well, personally and communally, we're all here to evolve. We're all here to achieve what we're, our real purpose in life. Not our job, not our gender, as Misa sang, not our eye color or our skin color, not our age, but who we really are, that divine expression. In 1919, World War I had just ended. And this community was started in the midst of that tragedy where the world learned in exponential ways how to kill each other more efficiently, and the cruelty and the pain of that war. San Francisco itself sent 2,000 men to the war, and 1,000 of them were wounded. 261 were killed, but when they came back, they threw a parade down Market Street, as you can see the picture of, with huge welcome home banners and a sense of pride and accomplishment. Today, we don't exist in that same kind of military and patriotic fervor because of how we are so removed from military families. I know we have one here in the community that I know of, but our military has so shifted that it's no longer our neighbor, it's no longer our sons. It's people who are hired to fight these battles for us. And I think we've lost something of the connection of the pain of war. It's even taken off of our TVs now. They won't show coffins coming home from the war. It's all removed from us, so we have lost something. And I'm asking us, what do we want to be in the next century? Because we get to choose. We get to choose how we hold the pain of the world and say no more. 100 years ago, Prohibition started as Unity San Francisco started. For those of you who don't know, the people who want to buy this building so we can buy our next one is a cannabis club. So I thought that was the ultimate irony that 100 years ago we started with Prohibition here in the city. And 100 years later, as we're contemplating a possible move, we're going to turn this into a sort of a bar, a 21st century bar. So it would be really interesting. So lots of things have changed. The 19th Amendment was signed the month before Unity San Francisco was started. Think about that. Think about that. The right to vote for women all across the country. No, California had led the way. They had 10 years earlier passed the right to vote for women, but that was not in national elections. And it, right. So in June of 1919, that shifted. And Unity has always been, I don't know if you know this, but Mary Baker Eddy was the first woman to start a religion in the United States. She started Christian Science, which we came out of that lineage. But out of Christian Science and out of transcendentalism and New Thought movements, women had major roles of power, and women were ordained immediately from day one. So Unity was co-founded by Charles and Myrtle Fillmore. And that empowerment continues to this day as we battle for the rights of everyone to vote. Everyone to vote. And the battle, the consciousness, the knowing that that is a right that we must protect and expand continues. So lots more work to be done at that. Chrissy Field was dedicated in 1919. There was no other airport in San Francisco. Air flight, of course, was brand new. In the exposition in 1915, there were flying shows because it was such an amazing new feat that people could fly, that there were all these exhibitions about planes and about the amazing new things of air travel. So think about it. When we were formed, people had just taken their wings and flown for the first time. The Hetchy Dam was started in 19. That's where we get our drinking water, which is considered some of the finest in all of the world. Takes so little, but that monumental dam and the shifting of this, the ability of this community to grow, started then as well. Now we look and watch the battles to tear it down and to restore what was. Because technology has enabled us to say, okay, we don't need it. We can get our water from this way or this way without destroying Yosemite. So it'd be interesting to see what happens in the next 100 years. This blew me away. The first transatlantic phone call happened. So they had never called from one side of the country to the other until this year, right? Until 1919, right? So think about that. Think about what that meant for communication, to be able to pick up the phone and talk to someone on the other side of the country, and how that shifted. And think about where we stand today, where we pull out our phone and all of a sudden we can talk to anyone in the world at any time. And then you can watch the live stream. Some of you are probably watching this right now on your phone, aren't you? Right? So that's streaming around the world. That this, all of us, and what we're saying is streaming around the world right now to someone's phone that they can sit and watch and be with us here, is how far we've come in 100 years. Right? Wow. Yeah. And in the midst of this, the Spanish influenza epidemic had just struck San Francisco. Now, 50 million people died worldwide because of this flu. 50 million. 16 million died in World War I, which was considered horrific. But 50 million died after it in the flu. And Unity is a healing movement. In the midst of this, in the middle of San Francisco, you couldn't walk down the street without a mask on. They wouldn't allow you on public transportation unless you were wearing a face mask. Now, we just did this year because of burning fires, but they were doing it out of fear, literal fear of contagion and disease. there's a picture that I almost put up. This is an Oakland auditorium that had been converted into a hospital. It was a picture I almost put up of a judge in a square downtown here in San Francisco who were having a courtroom trial out in the square because they didn't want to be in enclosed spaces with each other. And that's where Unity's teaching of wholeness and health and the right that I do not inherit disease, that mental understanding that as I think and as I hold, so is my world, transformed the city, transformed the people that were surviving that time. And Unity San Francisco was here in the 80s and the 90s in the midst of the AIDS crisis, when there was no cure, and there was fear, and there was millions of deaths for something that no one could make heads of tails of at the moment. And yet, we still hold the truth that I am a divine expression of God, and I do not inherit or my identity is not disease. My identity is wholeness, health, light, love. And as I look around the room today and know some of our friends who are watching on live stream, that we continue this battle in all of our health struggles, knowing that it is not the disease, but my reaction to it that determines how I will live. It is not the diagnosis, but my experience of life and my attitude towards it that will shift the progress, the determination, right? And yes, and when we stand in that wholeness, and remember that we are a healing movement, that I am whole, I am light, I am the expression of health, becomes our mantra, our affirmation, our rock, that the world shifts, diseases fade, and miracles occur. As the Course in Miracles teaches us, miracles are everyday occurrences. Everyday occurrences. I know that finding unity, as we're talking to one of our guests here today at Eric Butterworth's church in New York City in 1989, shifted my life forever. Forever. And understanding that God is the source, not the doctor. God is the cure when I embody it. So we are still relevant. Oh my God, are we still relevant? So many of you are the miracles. Maya Angelou sat in this community and learned, as she tells us from her Oprah show, God loves me. God loves me. Can you know that like Maya knew it? Can you say, God loves me? Right? So that was Maya's understanding of it. God loves me. Me. That was Maya's understanding of it from a book that we call our primer, Lessons in Truth, by Dr. Emily Cady. It was written over 100 years ago. Right? In the 1890s it was written. But what if today we said, I am God's love. I am God's love. Not God loves me, but I am God's love. Because I am the expression of God. I am God's love to give, to share, to transform, to be. And that's my job, to be love. If we can say it is that in our new century of transformation, we can stand there and go, I am God's love. And if you are God's love, how do you interact with people? How do you interact with people who are not so loving to you? If you are God's love, how do you interact with those people in your family who drive you absolutely crazy? If you are God's love, how do you interact with those people who call you less than? Do you think God's diminished? Do you think the divine is diminished because we don't believe in it or because someone curses it? I don't think so. When I stand as God's love, no, that is my identity. There is nothing I cannot do. There's nothing I have to do. Know that. You don't have to respond. You just have to be love. There's nothing to prove. Everything to be. So 100 years of understanding. When this community was started, this was our monthly magazine, Unity, devoted to practical Christianity. It was a monthly magazine. It transformed the landscape of spiritual teachings at the time. And it was amazing that Charles used every tool at his disposal to spread this message. So much so that everyone today, if you ask a stranger on the street, will say, oh yeah, well I know that thoughts create, that how I think creates the world. People know that affirmations work. It's spread across every field. But we coined affirmations, as Deanne was telling us a couple weeks ago, 2 weeks ago. And we coined affirmations here at Unity. We taught the power of mind action. We were the first to do it. And it has become so mainstream, and yet people don't know what Unity is. But we do have new magazines. This is what Unity magazine looks like today. Not quite the same as from 100 years ago, right? Again, these are the last 2 issues. You can pick them up in the lobby on your way out. And they both are, again, sharing women spiritual teachers. Thank God. It was very funny. When I tried out to get this job, I was really delighted. Felt this was my community. I wanted to be here. And part of the reservation from the community at the time was that I was a man. And they hadn't had a man minister in over 20 years. And how would that work, right? And I went, but I'm gay. Does that count at all? You know? And it was like, and I get it. And I get it in a world of male and white privilege. I am becoming more and more aware that for many of us, that we have to wake up to what we don't even know we know, right? That I can walk into a room and things happen for me that don't happen for other people has been a painful learning and a powerful one. That just knowing it, I don't have to do anything other than be aware of it, to watch it shift. And what do we want for the next century? What do I want for my son and daughter? My older son, as he navigates this world too, how do we transform? How do we do that? So we started as Unity Temples in San Francisco in 1919. Here we are today, Unity, San Francisco, ready for our next century. We have many gifts from the past. All the people who have walked through these doors, all 9 different buildings we have inhabited in those 100 years. Ready for our 10th? We'll see. We'll see. But all those different locations, all those different ministers, all those different experiences, all the difference that the world was in have brought us these gifts. All the giving bought us this building, right? All the work bought us stability in the rough times. All the love made us expansive, saved lives, transformed people's experiences. Those are the gifts of our past. Did you know that in the 1990s. There's only a couple people, as I look around, that are in the room today. They may be with us on live stream, that were here in the 90s when we had services at the Century Club a couple blocks away, because we had 300 or 400 people on Sunday in 2 services, and we couldn't fit in this space. Yes, did you know that? Right? Yeah, and that we had come back here in early 2000s, and when Reverend Maureen left, that there were people whose love sustained this place until Sonia could be called, and then I could be called, and here we are bursting at the seams again, ready to figure out what's next. The ebb and flow of our past will flavor our future. And there's a way we can use it to make wise decisions. I believe the steps of transformation are simple, is to know your past, to understand your history, where you've come from, and the amazing shoulders you stand on, the giants who've come before you. And the saying, those who do not understand history are doomed to repeat it, has a lot of truth in it. You know, there's reasons why they came back here and couldn't sustain at the Century Club. And to explore those and have those conversations with our wise elders and people who've come before us who know that will inform us as we move forward and make decisions for the future. But another one is being willing to change. I can't be who I need to be for a larger community and be the same that I am today. Something in me has to shift. And we can't be a larger community. We can't serve more people unless something in all of us shifts that allows it, that welcomes it, that celebrates it, even though it means we change what we know. We give up something that we have felt dear for something else that we hold might actually serve more. That's scary. Everybody loves to talk about growth, but nobody wants to change. Right? And you get the oxymoron of that, right? You cannot grow without changing. My son cannot walk without me losing that little boy, right? And there's pain in that. I look at my daughter now, who's 3.5, and go, where'd she go? Where'd the baby go? Right? I know you all do it to your children and grandchildren too. Where do they go to? And we have to be willing to change, but also to listen for divine guidance. And that is an art, right? That's why Deanne's teaching it too, as part of the prayer. Because a lot of times it is self-will run riot. I think we should be this. And it's ego running the show rather than divine wisdom. And so I want you to know that I think we all have that tendency, and ministers in spades. Because you get put on a pedestal, you get to be in charge. And I have watched, Dan and I talk about this all the time, we have watched some really scary examples of ministers and ministries who have leapt off a cliff without a good plan and affirmed that it was all going to show up. And listening to divine guidance, if you're really listening to Spirit, sometimes it'll tell you, slow down. Because like I mentioned earlier, I am divine love. I don't need to prove anything by being constantly in motion. I can sit and I can listen and I can wait for the right time to move. And that applies in this work, that applies in my parenting, that applies in my relationships, that applies to all of us. To remember that if we are divine love, sitting and waiting sometimes is the wisest choice. To take time in the silence before we act, before we move, is essential to transformation. And then it is to get up and move your feet and to take the next right step. Doesn't mean you know where the road's going to end. You will not be able to see it. Because if God's in charge, it's going to be something greater than you can ever imagine. If divine spirit is at work, it will be more than you ever thought possible. And if we are aligned, there is no limit to what we can do and be. So our next century, Unity San Francisco. You're it. You're Unity San Francisco, right? What do we want? What will we imagine? How will we take flight? How will we soar, as Paul sang? In that beautiful understanding that I want to blossom on the side of the hill. I want to take it all in and know it all. And what of that imagination will we make manifest? Because we can dream it all we want, but unless we take the action, take the steps, are willing to change, are willing to transform, it won't happen. It will remain an idea. Because not every idea, if you've noticed, manifests in your life. Not every thought becomes a thing. It takes the work of healing, right? It takes the work of protecting yourself, of affirming who you are, and taking the action to make yourself whole, to make yourself larger than you ever dreamed possible, more powerful than you knew you were, and more peaceful, more serene, and more grounded than you have ever been. This is our call, and we will continue to talk about it for the next months. And we need your full participation, your full buy-in, because together we are amazing. 100 years, look at you. 100 years, look around. Everyone in this room represents someone who came before, and probably represents 20 people who came before to create this space for that 100 years. Tag. You're it. Let's take that to our time of meditation.